Hello, I hope you all are doing so well today. I read a lot of books for January. I read about 12 books this month, and so I want to talk about them. So here is my finished page, kind of, I guess, of my January TBR. So here's the physical TBR I picked out, and then all the books I read in addition. So I read about, I think, 4 books from my physical TBR. Well, I read a lot of books from my physical TBR. The monthly TBR, I read about 4. I read 6 books for my physical TBR, and then I listened to 2 audiobooks that I do not own. So, to begin, first book I read is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I love this book. This was a great start to the year. Everything about colonization and a lot of the struggles of wanting an improved life, so to speak, and not wanting to sacrifice the life you already have is a big talking point of this book. A lot of language and morphing into something that's not necessarily you, and just how language works and how language itself is a colonizer, I thought was quite intriguing, and how there's so many historical and cultural ties to language. There's so much that goes into this book that I think is personally so phenomenal. I love language, and I love studying language and culture and everything that goes with that, and so reading this book was so devastating but so wonderful. I think it's, I don't know, I've never read anything by R.F. Kuang before, and I've always wanted to since she published the first book, I think, of the Poppy War, and this book just was it. It was that girl. So great start to my year. I think starting off the video with a good book, I think if I had to recommend any of these books like to read like immediately, I honestly would probably say Babel. She is a little bit big. She's about 500-ish to 550 pages if I remember right, but she is worth it. Next, I read Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. This is a play. It's about 121 pages. I think it's 2 acts if I remember right. Yes, it's 2 acts. And this basically follows Willie Loman and his 2 sons and his wife, and kind of their strife with trying to achieve the American dream and what it means to achieve the American dream. And so we basically follow Willie as he is an older man at this point, has lived his life, and how he needs to make ends meet as a salesman. And so again, a great read, a great start to my year. I'm not really ranking any of these. I really struggle when it comes to ranking books, but Babel for me is obviously 5 stars. Honestly, this is probably like a 4.5 for me. I really enjoyed this, and it was, I don't know if I would say I enjoyed it, but I would say that I was very much interested in it, and I was very much captivated by the content. Next, I read When the Moon Hatched. This, again, a pretty big book. I think she's about 600, 700 pages long. And I'm not going to lie, I was very confused at the very beginning of this book, but I also skipped over so much that is introduced. Like, there's like 20 pages, I think, at the beginning of this book that is just like the appendix and just like pronunciations. And I skipped right past that because I did not want to waste any time getting into this. And it bit me in my butt. I probably should have read them. And so I would say this is a good start to like a romantic-y type story. I honestly really did enjoy this. I wasn't really expecting anything because I have not heard anyone talk about it. I've seen people be like obsessed with this book and loving it, but I have not heard anything. I'm going to contribute to that because I really don't know what to say. I'm just kind of waiting for the next book to come out, and I think I honestly might have to reread it before then just to make sure I understand everything, because like I said, I was a little confused. And I mean, I understood the book, I know what happened, but like, it was very intriguing to me. So, and kind of, it's different but the same as a lot of romantasy. I feel like a lot of things are kind of morphing together for me. I'm not going to lie, this really reminded me of Fear the Flames. And I'm not saying any copycat or anything like that. I'm just saying that for some reason when reading this gave me the same vibes as Fear the Flames. Not saying that the story is the same at all. I mean, there are some similarities, I would say, but it very much reminded me of that. So if you liked this, I would say read Fear the Flames. If you liked Fear the Flames, I would say read this. I forgot, there's one book I don't own that I read digitally from my library, and that is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I completely forgot about this book because I did not enjoy it. Going to be very honest with you. The Familiar was an intriguing story, and I understand what Leigh Bardugo was trying to do with the book, but I think that the theme of the story was kind of like, at least what I took as the theme, I felt like it wasn't really prevalent until later in the book. Some of it was in the beginning. It's very obvious when you start reading the book what is happening. I don't know. I don't really like how the story progressed and what happened. I just don't think it was for me. So if you like that book, I'm glad you enjoyed it, but for me, I just don't think it was for me. Continuing on, I read A Swiftly Tilting Planet by Madeline Long. This is the third book in the Wrinkle in Time Quintet, and I don't really know what to say other than we're following just the main characters of A Wrinkle in Time as stuff progresses. And this is a little more deep, I would say, compared to the other two. I think that all of these books are very relevant, I'll say. I think all of these books are very relevant and just tackle a lot of themes of humanity is really the best way I can describe it. So it really is just talking about a lot of real life issues, things that we as humans struggle with, I guess. And so this book was so phenomenal. I have to rate this a 5 stars. I have so much love for middle grade and for stories being accessible to children and just learning. And I would say this book is just that. I really enjoy this series. I think if you have anything from like an older elementary school child to middle school to beyond, like I said, I'm 23 and I'm reading these and I love them so much. I love middle grade. I am such an advocate for middle grade. I think it's one of the best genres to exist, and because it's accessible to adolescents, but you can still enjoy the stories as you get older. And so I think this is just one of my favorite series of all time, and so I'm so glad I'm getting to read it and just see it. So absolute 5 stars for me. Next, I listened to Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. This is his memoir. It really discusses his life, as most memoirs do, just his upbringing with his parents, kind of being an only child, being kind of left alone, just him being raised in between both his parents, who are relatively famous, I guess, and just they're trying to be successful people while also trying to be parents. And then it goes into just his life, his rise to fame, how he dealt with all of those things, especially with addiction and trying to be recovered. And so it was a very worthwhile read or listen, because I didn't read it. He narrates it, and so I listened to it. And I'm not going to rate anything or say anything that really discusses my opinion on that, but I will definitely say it was heartbreaking listening to, knowing that everything he says in the book and knowing that he's gone. Personally, I'm going to just say heartbreaking to me, listening to it and knowing that he's passed and how he passed. And so that's really all I'm going to say on that, but I did listen to it, and if you're interested in his life, I think it's worth listening to. So next, I read Six Scorched Roses by Crissa Broadbent. This is a novella in the Nightborn series, Crowns of Nyxia. If I'm not saying it right, please put a pronouncer in the comments. Thank you. So this is like 150-ish pages. I honestly very much enjoyed this. I really don't remember seeing these characters specifically in the Nightborn, the first book of The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I don't remember seeing these characters. I know how they're related, but I really did enjoy it. I was not sure if I was going to, but I think this was a very fun premise in that world, and just how this little story developed, I really enjoyed it. And so then, speaking of vampires, I listened to Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz. So that was interesting. That is basically her. She obviously, as most memoirs, she discusses the very beginning of her life and her upbringing, but she pretty much dives in right away into her experiences of being in a cult and how that conflicted with her life, especially becoming an actress and being married and just so on and so forth. And so I was an avid watcher of One Tree Hill when I was younger. I started making my husband watch it a couple years ago, and we haven't finished it, watching it together, but I really do love it. I love basketball. I grew up playing basketball. So growing up, I thought it was a great show. And so being able to listen to her experience on the show, in addition to like her personal life, was quite interesting. And so I would recommend, if you watch One Tree Hill, to listen to it. Next, I read The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. This is in the Omegaverse, essentially. And we see them essentially get together. It's a romance that's not really surprising. When you see someone on the cover, you typically know who's getting together and how that's going to go. So if that is considered a spoiler, it shouldn't be. Anyways, so I don't even remember their names. Mackenzie and oh my gosh, Noah. This is so embarrassing. So Mackenzie and Noah are both doctors at some hospital, I think in Colorado. And basically a predicament happens where they end up fake dating and are fake mated. So that is the premise of this story and how it develops. I'm not going to say, but it was quite predictable. I think if you've read a single romance in your life, you know what you're getting into. I honestly enjoyed the banter a lot. I enjoyed them together. And so I was very nervous going into it, but I really did enjoy those parts. So I think I rated this like a 4-star. So next I read Lunar Love by Lauren Kang Jessen. This is a romance book, obviously, that follows matchmaking. So essentially, our main girl, I think her name is Olivia, she is taking over her family's matchmaking business, which is a very traditional Chinese matchmaking business based off the zodiac and personality, and just having everything be kind of almost strict in that way of making sure that you have the perfect match for you based off of your stars and zodiac, personality, everything that goes associated with the zodiac. Then comes in Bennett, who is kind of doing the same premise, but he's doing a digital app that's kind of like your I don't know dating apps, like Tinder, Bumble, whatever there is. So she's kind of upset that it's becoming so modernized, and they end up meeting. I would say that this is a 3.5 for me. So if the position of the camera is moved, my phone died, so I had to switch some things around. So I have 2 books left, and that is 1984 by George Orwell. This is a dystopian taking place in 1984. I think he wrote this in the 50s, having absolute power in your government, essentially, and how that plays out and how that affects literally everyone who's not a part of that party. And so, phenomenal read, 5 stars. Well, I'll say 4.5, because some stuff really grossed me out as a woman reading this. I think it is very valuable to read, and the point that Orwell is trying to get across, but I definitely believe that there are some things that are just icky and that I don't think needed to be in there, and some things that are just very real, but very much written from a man's point of view than a woman's, and it really shows. I don't really read work by men very often, and this is part of the reason why. So I hope this doesn't discourage you from reading it. If it does, I don't blame you. I think there's some great dystopian works that aren't disgusting, essentially, or don't have certain plot points that are hard to read. I think that almost everything in this book is valuable, but as a woman, I prefer Animal Farm to 1984. Out of those are his 2 most popular works. I don't know if I'll read his other work or not. I'm debating on it. So if you've read them, please let me know what you think I should do. But that is where I stand on this. I really enjoyed reading this for what it is and for the message it was trying to portray, or that it was portraying, I should say, from what I took of it. Because it is a very grim reality of the world we live in, and with certain things on the rise, I think that it is a good book to read. So I'm just going to leave it with that. And then last, I read and listened to Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And so this book basically follows Jane Eyre as she's in this house with this family, and just kind of follows her, essentially. I mean, it's her book. And so it follows her romance, her life as things develop. I really don't know what to say. This is a classic. I mean, I personally believe that no matter how old a book is, I don't really want to spoil too much of it, if I can not, because I think every reader should go into a book blind, is kind of how I feel. Unless you're looking for a recommendation and want to know just some basic plot points. With the genre, you can kind of understand what's going to happen immediately, but I enjoyed it. I think, to me, it was kind of interesting reading this, because I know that for most versions of Wuthering Heights by her sister, that by Emily Bronte, that if you don't know, Wuthering Heights was her novel, and she kind of got screwed over by her publishers when she first published it, and it was kind of like an unedited manuscript where a lot of things were misspelled. There was some errors with like capitalization and just how how the story progressed as well, a little bit. And so Emily Bronte died, and her sister Charlotte edited that very heavily and kind of made it her own. And so a lot of modern editions of Wuthering Heights are based off of that initial manuscript that was published. And I don't know how much of Charlotte's influence was based off of that first manuscript. I'm not too sure. But either way, I've read like the edition based off of that original manuscript, which is, like I said, the most common one, I believe, that they try to derive from. But for some reason, reading this, because I read Wuthering Heights about 4 years ago now. Wow, that is crazy to say. I read that about 4 years ago, and so this very much just reminded me of that and that storytelling. And I mean, they are the same family, and so they have some same experiences. But for some reason, it just very much was like, oh my gosh, this is definitely a Bronte work. So that's really all I have to say when it comes to this. I really did enjoy it, though. It kind of lost some of my interest just because of how long it is. But nonetheless, I did enjoy it. It just definitely dragged on a little bit longer than I wanted it to. So I would just say a solid 3.5 star, because I do really enjoy classics. It just feels so silly to me for some of the things that happened in this book, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. I did start Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, which is the third book in the Empyrean series, which is Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, Onyx Storm, and so that was enjoyable. I am currently about like 150 pages into it, and so I'm hoping to finish that in this month of February. But that is really all I have to give to you guys, so thanks for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!